Imagine picking up your smartphone or a new shirt from a retail store and asking a simple question. Where did this really come from? Not the store, not even the brand's headquarters, but every country, factory, and port that touched it along the way. For most products today, the honest answer is almost everywhere. Because modern supply chains are no longer local or even regional. They are deeply connected global networks, weaving together dozens of companies, multiple countries before a product reaches the customer. And as business leaders, understanding this global reality is no longer optional because it shapes cost, risk, lead times, and ultimately competitiveness. First, let's start with how far a single product travels. Take a smartphone as an example. Many of its key components, like chips, sensors, cameras, and displays, are designed in the United States, Japan, South Korea, or Europe, but are manufactured and assembled across multiple Asian countries. Assembly might happen in large factories in China, India, or Vietnam, often managed by global contract manufacturers such as Foxconn or Pegatron, which operate networks of plants across these locations. From there, finished phones are shipped by sea or air to distribution hubs in regions like Europe, North America, or the Middle East, before finally moving to local warehouses and retail outlets. So, what looks like made in X label is actually the end result of a complex multi country choreography. The same pattern appears in everyday consumer products. A single apparel item may involve cotton grown in one country, yarn spun in another, fabric dyed and finished elsewhere, and final stitching in a large garment factory in Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, or Vietnam before it's shipped to fashion hubs like New York, London, or Berlin. In other words, every purchase you make is a silent testimony to cross border coordination. Then, another trend that we're seeing right now is that manufacturing has shifted into global clusters. One key reason global supply chains look this way is the rise of manufacturing clusters. Instead of producing everything close to end markets, companies deliberately concentrate manufacturing in countries that specialize in particular stages of production. For example, in electronics, China remains a dominant manufacturing base for assembly, even as brands diversify. Reports show that a large share of devices, like smartphones and tablets, are still assembled in Chinese factories run by Taiwanese companies, while countries like Vietnam and India have emerged as growing alternative hubs. India, for example, has rapidly expanded iPhone assembly. Major contractors like Foxconn and Pegatron have invested heavily in Indian plants, while local groups such as Tata are now key players in Apple's supply chain, helping India become Apple's second major manufacturing hub after China. In textile and apparel, manufacturing clusters have concentrated in countries like China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, India, and Sri Lanka. Bangladesh is now one of the world's leading exporters of ready-made garments, supplying brands like Zara, H&M, Uniqlo, and others, thanks to large-scale factories and competitive labor costs. These clusters create powerful ecosystems, skills, suppliers, logistics, and infrastructure all in one place. But they also create concentration risk. When one region is disrupted, the ripple effects are global. Then we are also seeing transport routes are measured in weeks, not days. Once products leave factories, they embark on transport routes that span continents. For most bulk goods, ocean freight remains the backbone of global trade, reliable, cost effective, but slow. Typical sea freight from Asia to major markets is measured in weeks. Guides on global freight show that sea shipments commonly take around 20 to 45 days, depending on distance, route, and port congestion. For example, a container from China to the US West Coast can take around 15 to 30 days, while shipments to the US East Coast or Europe can stretch closer to 25 to 40 days. And that's just port to port. Door to door, including inland transport, customs, and handling, can easily turn into 4 to 6 weeks or longer in peak seasons. Air freight, of course, is much faster, often within a week, but significantly more expensive. So, most companies reserve air freight for high value, time sensitive items or emergencies, while relying on ocean freight for the majority of volumes. For business leaders, this has two implications. First, inventory decisions must account for long and variable transit times. Second, disruptions at ports, canals, or key hubs can instantly cascade into stockouts or excess inventory on the other side of the world. Then, let's talk a bit about cross-border regulations that shape every step. So, global supply chains do not cross borders physically, they cross legal or regulatory systems at every step. Each movement of goods triggers customs procedures, documentation, and compliance checks. Trade regulations influence what can be sourced from where and at what cost. Tariffs, trade agreements, and sanctions can suddenly make one route unviable and another strategically attractive. Compliance requirements such as rules of origin, safety standards, or sustainability certifications add further complexity. In apparel, for example, large brands must ensure compliance not only with product quality standards but also with labor and environmental rules across supply countries. Regulatory shifts can be rapid. For instance, new due diligence and sustainability requirements in Western markets are pushing companies to map and monitor their entire supply chains rather than their just first-tier suppliers. For executives, this means supply chain strategy is now tightly linked with legal, regulatory, and ESG or environmental, social, and governance strategy. So now let's look at a good example, the iPhone, a flagship example of a global supply chain. The iPhone has become one of the most analyzed examples of a truly global supply chain. At a high level, the product integrates design, high-tech components, and assembly spread across multiple regions, each chosen for specific capabilities. Many core technologies like the operating system and chipset design are developed in the United States, while critical components come from a global network of suppliers in countries such as Japan, South Korea, and Europe. Assembly historically concentrated in giant plants in mainland China, managed by contract manufacturers like Foxconn and Pegatron, which employ large workforces dedicated to Apple production. In the recent years, the network has evolved. Apple has expanded manufacturing in Vietnam and India, with India aiming to produce a growing share of global iPhones as part of a diversification strategy away from over-reliance on China. Once assembled, iPhones move through complex logistics routes: sea freight for bulk shipments to regional distribution centers, air freight for launches and high demand periods where speed outweighs cost. By the time a customer buys an iPhone in a store, it has passed through multiple countries, several suppliers, and at least one international border crossing. This is not an exception. It's a blueprint of how advanced products are built and delivered today. Then let's look at another example, fast fashion, from design to store in just a matter of weeks. So if the iPhone shows how technology products move, fast fashion shows how speed and trend cycles reshape supply chains. Fast fashion brands aim to move from design to store shelves in just a matter of weeks, responding rapidly to changing consumer tastes. For leading brands, This often means a hybrid model. Nearby or regional suppliers handle short runs and trend-driven items with shorter lead times, and offshore manufacturing hubs in Asia handle large volume items. But not all supplier countries can operate at the same speed. Studies of garment industry in Bangladesh show that typical lead times from order to delivery can be around 90 to 120 days, much longer than some competitors. By contrast, rivals such as China can often deliver within about 30 to 35 days and Vietnam around 60 days thanks to more streamlined supply chains and better infrastructure. This difference in lead times has real commercial consequences. In fashion, product life cycles can be as short as 8 weeks in store, meaning that delays of even 1 or 2 weeks can sharply reduce sales and margins. To stay competitive, brands are experimenting with nearshoring, moving parts of production closer to end markets to reduce 3 to 6 month lead times often seen in traditional offshore models. And the lesson for leaders is clear. Speed, flexibility, and proximity to the customer are now strategic levers, not just operational details. So, what does this global, multi country, weeks long, regulation heavy reality mean for you as a business professional? Well, first, risk is now systematic and interconnected. A disruption in a single manufacturing cluster, port, or regulatory regime can ripple through the entire network. Second, visibility is no longer nice to have. Leaders need to have line of sight, not just to first-tier suppliers, but deeper into the chain across countries, modes of transport, and also regulatory environments. Third, strategy must balance cost efficiency with resilience. Manufacturing in a single low-cost location is attractive on paper, but diversification across China, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh, and other hubs can be critical for continuity. As you think about your own products, whether they are electronics, garments, industrial components, or services wrapped around them, ask yourself these 3 questions. Question number 1. How many countries does our product truly touch before it reaches the customer? Question number 2. Where are our critical clusters and what happens if one of them fails? Question number 3. Are our supply chains designed only for cost and efficiency, or are they designed to survive and compete in a global, uncertain world? Because in today's economy, supply chains are not just a back office function. They are the front line of strategy, resilience, and competitive advantage in a deeply globalized marketplace.